Ever since the Frank Ocean Coachella debacle, it led me down a rabbit hole to revisit his Nostalgia Ultra and Channel Orange era in the early 2010s when he first came on the scene, and more specifically, his former friendship with the singer Miguel. Up until recently, I was not aware that the two artists had a long history with one another as they came up in the music industry. I only knew of the comments Miguel previously made against Frank some years ago, so I wanted to briefly take a quick trip down memory lane to look back at their former friendship, their career origins, and analyze how and why the two R&B heavyweights were quote-unquote beefing with one another. First, I want to give a shout out to the user Mayday19 on Reddit, who published a blog post on the Frank Ocean 365 Tumblr page in 2017, which provided a detailed and elaborate breakdown of Frank and Miguel's origin in the music industry from 2005 to 2017. I will link the Tumblr page in the description, and I highly recommend that page for any Frank fans who would appreciate a comprehensive analysis of the singer's career. Before both artists became the faces of the new wave of alternative R&B, they met through producer Brian Kennedy around 2006 when Frank moved to LA after Hurricane Katrina. During that time, Miguel was working on his debut album and was signed to the indie label Black Ice. Unfortunately, the album that was supposed to be released in November of 2006 was ultimately shelved, which led to Miguel's departure from the label. A year later, Miguel signed to Jive Records after the current president of RCA Records, Mark Pitts, heard Miguel's song Sure Thing. Despite being on a new major label, Miguel was unable to release any new music due to a lawsuit from his former label Black Ice due to a breach of contract, which was later settled. From 2007 to 2010, Miguel used this time to write for other artists on songs such as Finding My Way Back by Jaheim on his album Another Round, and the song Monstar by Usher on his album Raymond vs. Raymond, both released in 2010. The album All I Want Is You was eventually released in November of 2010. Although the album debuted at number 109 on the Billboard 200 and sold 11,000 copies the first week, the singles Sure Thing and Quickie performed relatively well on the Hot 100 chart, in which it peaked at number 36 and number 62, respectively, on the charts. As for Frank, during his time in Los Angeles, he was learning and strengthening his skills as a producer by working with singer-songwriting producer Troy Noka. This gave Frank the opportunity to sell his first song titled I Fell to Noel Gordon. In 2009, Frank, who went by the name Lonnie Bro at the time, joined the LA-based hip-hop music collective Odd Future, and also met songwriter and producer Tricky Stewart, who signed the songwriter to his Def Jam subsidiary label Red Zone to begin working on Frank's debut project, Nostalgia Ultra. For the next year, Frank felt like he was being neglected on Def Jam, and that the label was continuously shelving his project, which inevitably soured the relationship Frank had with the label, and with Tricky, whom Frank felt did not help him through his battle with the label. Eventually, the singer, who was frustrated with being pushed aside, went rogue on the label and worked independently on his project and decided to go against the label by releasing Nostalgia Ultra for free online in February of 2011, which received widespread critical acclaim. In old tweets released after the impromptu release, Frank spoke on his decision by saying, quote, I did this, not Island Def Jam. That's why you see no label logo on the artwork that I did. Guess it's my fault for trusting my dumb lawyer and signing my career over to a failing company. F Def Jam, and any company that goes the length of signing a kid with dreams and talent with no intention of following through. F 'em. Now back to my day. Frank continued by saying, quote, I woke up today feeling like all my followers should know that. My record label slept on me. Like slept for over a year. And just for clarity, sleeping is fine, but don't wake up with your effing hand out. No swag, unquote. In an interview with The Fader after the release of Frank's album Blonde in 2016, in which Frank was able to successfully circumvent Def Jam to independently release the critically acclaimed album, Tricky Stewart recalled the experience Frank had with the label in his early days and how he foresaw the situation happening. Tricky said, quote, Frank came in with the best intentions of being a great artist to a label. He was looking at it with an open mind. But bringing him into Def Jam was a little bit of a disaster. It was probably, in hindsight, a huge mistake on my part. The label wasn't motivated by the signing. They didn't give him the respect that I thought he deserved. I couldn't really get Def Jam to respond to him the way that I wanted them to respond to him, unquote. Tricky went on to say, quote, At the end of the day, I think Def Jam created a monster that they couldn't control. He just treated them how he was treated. There's too many artists out there with that story. Luckily for Frank, he was able to turn a negative time and a negative period into something that worked for him and his family. This is a changing of the guard. This story has got to make label people wake up and realize that they have great talent on their label, unquote. At this point, the success of the mixtape, Nostalgia Ultra, led to Frank becoming a sought-after songwriter for major artists such as Beyoncé for her song I Miss You on her album 4, One Thing by Alicia Keys on her album Girl on Fire, A No Church in the Wild and Made in America on the collaboration album Watch the Throne by Jay-Z and Kanye West. Eventually, in the spring and summer of 2011, the relationship with Def Jam and Frank gradually improved, which led to the label funding the production for what would become Frank's debut album, Channel Orange, released in July of 2012. The album was preceded by the lead single, Thinking About You, as well as a letter posted to the singer's Tumblr page describing how his first love was with a man. The album went on to debut at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and sold 131,000 copies in the first week. Later that year, in 2012, Miguel released his critically acclaimed sophomore album, Kaleidoscope Dream, in November, which debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and sold 71,000 copies in the first week. Led by hit singles such as Do You, How Many Drinks, and Adorn, in which I feel like Adorn is one of the best R&B songs of all time, the album was regarded similarly to Channel Orange in that critics felt that both albums pushed the needle for mainstream innovation for R&B. Though both artists were riding high on their flourishing careers, in promotion for Kaleidoscope Dream, Miguel noted in a November 2012 interview to Fader that he and Frank Ocean used to be close, but he refrained to discuss the status of their friendship at that time. A month later, Grammy nominations for the 2013 award ceremony were revealed, in which Miguel earned 3 nominations and Frank earned 6, both for his album and his contributions on Watch the Throne. At the February 2013 award ceremony, it was the first time both artists were seen in public, and most importantly, they were competing against one another in the Best Urban Contemporary Album category, in which Frank won. As a contextual side note, Frank was the very first recipient of this category. Additionally, many artists have voiced their disapproval for the term urban contemporary, as they felt it was just a default category to group all of the black artists together regardless of genre. The title of this category was eventually changed in 2021 to Best Progressive R&B Album, in which Thundercat became the first recipient under the new name. Back to the Grammys. Many viewers noticed that the other contenders, Miguel and Chris Brown, remained seated as the rest of the audience gave a standing ovation as Frank went to accept his award. When asked by TMZ a month later on his choice to remain seated, Miguel congratulated Frank on the award, but said that he is a very competitive person, and said that if he had the chance for a do-over, he still would not give Frank a standing ovation. Fast forward to 2015, both Frank and Miguel were on a 3 to 4 year break between albums. As a side note, please be sure to check out my hiatus video as I take a look at the impact a hiatus has on an artist's career. In the summer of 2015, Miguel was promoting his 3rd studio album, Wild Heart, in which the singer did an interview with the Sunday Times, where he was asked about his relationship with Frank, as well as the comparisons to Frank and The Weeknd. Miguel said, quote, "I wouldn't say we were friends. To be completely honest, and no disrespect to anyone, I genuinely believe that I make better music all the way around." He went on to say regarding the comparisons that it's interesting, but we'll see who's in it for the long haul. It's like a marathon, you know? Unquote. Immediately after that interview was released to the public, Miguel went to Twitter to explain his previous statements by saying, "I want to clear the air. Yes, I am competitive. We all have to have a level of confidence and competitiveness to put ourselves on the line day in and day out. But I also believe there's room for all artists. That's what Wild Heart is about, celebrating individuality. I guess what I'm saying is, there's no need to compare apples to oranges. There's something out there for everyone. That's why I'm here and I'm able to do what I do. So thank you to everyone who enjoys my music, and all love to anyone who doesn't. We're all here to find our own wave, and that's okay. Stay passionate, stay free, and of course stay wild." Miguel went on to release Wild Heart in June of 2015, in which the artist was praised for continuing to expand and transcend the genre of R&B with his lyricism and psychedelic rock sounds. As for Frank, he released his highly anticipated album, Blonde, which was remarked as an album that solidified a generational shift in modern pop. The album went on to land in several top 20 spots for critics' best albums of 2016 or greatest albums of the 2010s. In promotion for his 4th studio album, War and Leisure, in 2017, Miguel spoke to The Guardian about how he felt Wild Heart did not resonate with certain audiences in the way which he had hoped, and also spoke on his competitive traits that have followed him into adulthood. This led him to look back on his rivalry with Frank Ocean by mentioning how he was embarrassed of the situation by saying, quote, "Egos are a crazy thing. The version of myself I was 2, 3, 4 years ago, even last week, is different from who I am today. That's not who I am, and I'm a big fan of his music and his creativity, We need more people out there doing that, unquote. Up until this day, Frank has never publicly mentioned Miguel or spoke on their former friendship at all, which is no surprise considering that he does his best to avoid all things media altogether. All in all, it seems we may never know what exactly severed the relationship they had with one another, as I am sure they share a lot of memories of their rise in the industry. I would probably attribute the situation to the fans and media constantly comparing the two early in their careers. After Frank dropped an instant classic with Nostalgia Ultra, it was hailed as a masterpiece, which marked the beginning of the reverence and well-deserved massive hype Frank received. Although Miguel was and is insanely talented, it seems he never received the same level of recognition from the masses in which he probably felt he deserved. Or, ultimately, it was a case of friends who drifted apart as time went on. Moreover, I never stood on either side of the debate on who was better out of the two, as I felt they make two different styles of music and have a vastly different approach to their artistry. Miguel is one of the few artists who is uniquely able to mesh funk and psychedelic elements to create an old school and futuristic formula, with a dash of rock that has allowed him to create a lane of alternative R&B that has yet to be replicated. Additionally, with his incredible vocals, it makes it difficult for him to put out a bad record. As for Frank, the elusive artist is gifted with the ability to tell descriptive stories that allows people to immerse themselves in his world through his metaphorical imagery. He is such a prolific songwriter in which he is able to narrate such a vivid picture in a way that still leaves the listener with the fortune to come up with their own personal interpretations. Songs such as Pyramids, Chanel, or White Ferrari showcase that. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the quote-unquote beef between the two artists. Do you think they had or have any similarities? And do you prefer one artist over the other? Also, let me know your favorite albums or songs by Miguel or Frank. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.